There are hundreds of thousands of frozen embryos in the United States. What are we going to do with them all? Hey, Kathy Bernardo here from the Northeast Assisted Fertility Group. Like I said, there are hundreds of thousands of frozen embryos in storage here in the United States. Now, why is that? So let me just explain what happens with IVF. It's like when in a normal ovulation, a woman releases a number of eggs, but only one comes to maturity. And all the other eggs released that month just die. And if that one egg that comes to maturity doesn't get fertilized, woman gets her period and then starts her next cycle. Now, when you're doing IVF, what they do is they give you drugs that will make more than one egg come to maturity, and that's to increase the probability that you'll get a healthy egg. So you'll get a number of eggs. Maybe you'll get 12 in the retrieval, 12 mature eggs, and then they'll all be fertilized in vitro, IVF, in vitro fertilization, and observed. And let's hope what you're going for is more than one healthy embryo. So what would they typically do is transfer one of those embryos and then freeze the rest. So in a typical retrieval, you may get 4 really great healthy embryos. 1 is transferred, 3 are frozen. If that one that's transferred doesn't work, then they may thaw another one and do another transfer. But if it works, there you've got those 3 embryos for siblings, or sometimes recipients just keep them frozen in perpetuity, and that's why we're left over with these hundreds of thousands of embryos. Now, when you do an IVF at a clinic, they will have you sign consent forms about what to do with these embryos, and there's yearly storage fees, and then what happens if you don't want to use them, how they could be thawed, how they can be discarded, and these are the part of the protocol that your clinic has. And you may have seen in the news sometimes that divorcing couples dispute over the embryos. It's a very difficult situation. If one parent wants to thaw and transfer it, then what do? What is about custody? What about child support? All these things can get very complicated. Now, the ASRM had in 2013 put out an ethical statement about what to do with embryos that are unclaimed or an absent of these consent forms. That after a certain period of, I think, about 5 years, they can be thawed and destroyed. Embryos cannot be donated or used for scientific research. Now, just for clarification, there's a big difference between an egg and an embryo. So an embryo is an actually fertilized egg that is about 5 days old and then frozen. So there's sperm there, which is usually from the intended parent, mixed in with the egg to create an embryo. So with donor eggs, and you'll find donor egg banks everywhere where they freeze them in batches and they can be sold to recipients. But embryos cannot be sold. That is not allowed. They can be kind of donated, they can be thawed and destroyed. Very rarely are they given to research, but it's never without the recipient's or intended parent's consent. According to the ASRM, about 4% of embryos in storage are abandoned each year. Now, like I said, embryos cannot be sold, but they can be donated. So there are some organizations in this country that arrange embryo donation, and some very Christian places call it embryo adoption and consider it pretty much analogous to an adoption of a baby. These organizations, they call these frozen embryos snowflakes because they're like little frozen embryos. Some of these organizations that organize embryo donation are very Christian. They consider frozen embryos, they give them full personhood, and these organizations are also very against abortion and all of that. So just be aware of that. If you're seeking to adopt an embryo, they may not be open to more non-traditional families. And certainly embryo adoption is a lot cheaper than IVF because first of all, you can't buy it. You can only have it donated to you. Of course, there may be some fees involved in that, but they would be minimal, and they'd be nothing like the cost of IVF. So it is a more affordable way to go, but just keep in mind the kinds of organizations that do these things, and of course, you'd like to get full information on the source of these embryos. So I hope that was helpful. If so, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel and go to assistedfertility.com for more information on egg donation and surrogacy. Thanks so much for watching.